Samantha Lewis was humiliated and denied service at the Grand Oak Diner simply because of who she was. Todd Miller, the arrogant waiter, thought he could assert control with his prejudice, treating her with blatant disrespect. But minutes later, Samantha returned in her FBI uniform, calmly confronting him and turning the tables with undeniable authority. Just wait to see how her courage and composure forced justice in this tense, unforgettable showdown, and why the diner would never forget what happened that morning. Samantha Lewis pushed open the glass door of the Grand Oak Diner, letting in the morning sun and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The din of conversations, clinking cutlery, and the hum of an old jukebox filled the air. It was Saturday, and the diner was busy, but not overwhelmingly so. Samantha had pictured herself sitting at a corner booth, a warm cup of coffee in hand, enjoying the rare luxury of a slow morning after a week that had drained her emotionally and physically. Her work with the FBI often left her on edge, chasing leads that stretched across the state, dealing with situations most people couldn't even imagine. But this morning, she had promised herself a moment of peace, a brief reprieve from the constant pressure. She dressed casually, a soft navy blouse paired with dark jeans, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. She was careful not to draw attention. Today, she wasn't an agent. She was just Samantha, a woman seeking a quiet breakfast. And yet, as soon as she stepped inside, she felt eyes on her. Todd Miller, the waiter who hovered near the counter, was the source of that scrutiny. He was a man in his early 30s with an easy smile that, under normal circumstances, might have seemed welcoming. But today, that smile was gone. In its place was a look that made Samantha's chest tighten, a mixture of judgment and thinly veiled contempt. His arms crossed as he leaned against the counter, the posture a silent barricade between her and the table she had already spotted by the window. Samantha took a deep breath, trying to brush it off. Maybe he was having a bad morning. Maybe she was reading too much into it. She had been trained to assess threats and anomalies, to parse behavior, and she knew instinctively that something was off. Her steps toward the booth were cautious, but confident. She was determined not to let anyone disturb her peace. But the words hit before she could even sit down. "Ma'am, we don't serve people like you here," Todd said, his tone sharp, deliberate, and heavy with malice. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, thick and suffocating. Shock froze Samantha in place. Her hand, inches from the chair, hovered mid-air. The other patrons went about their meals, oblivious or unwilling to intervene. Her heart lurched. She blinked, hoping her ears had deceived her, that she had misunderstood. But the words rang clear, echoing off the diner's linoleum floor and polished wood paneling. She felt a hot surge of disbelief followed immediately by a burning anger that seemed to radiate from her chest outward. How could someone, anyone, still act this way, in broad daylight in the year 2025? How could prejudice still find a place in the mundane, ordinary act of ordering breakfast? Samantha's stomach tightened. Her blood felt like fire coursing through her veins. She clenched her fists at her sides, fighting the impulse to speak, to react in a way that would escalate the moment into chaos. But her mind was sharp, calculating. She knew that an impulsive confrontation might not bring justice. It might only give Todd the satisfaction of a scene. Yet every fiber of her being screamed in defiance. The injustice of it, the audacity, the sheer cruelty of being judged and rejected for something as inherent as who she was, ignited a storm of fury inside her. Anger bubbled up alongside disbelief, a searing heat that demanded recognition. She could feel her breathing quicken, shallow and fast, as her pulse hammered in her temples. The diner, with its clinking plates and cheerful chatter, seemed to shrink around her, and for a moment all she could see was the man blocking her path, the embodiment of prejudice that refused to die quietly in the modern world. Samantha stood tall, her posture straight despite the swirling emotions. She would not be reduced to a victim. She would not allow this blatant act of discrimination to go unchallenged. Anger surged, raw and potent, not just at Todd, but at the broader injustice that his words represented. And yet, beneath the fury, a steely resolve began to form. This was not just about a table or a meal. This was about standing firm in the face of humiliation, about proving that integrity, strength, and dignity could overcome ignorance. As Todd smirked, thinking he had asserted control, Samantha's mind raced, already calculating her next move. The fire inside her had been ignited, and there would be no retreat. Samantha stepped out of the Grand Oak Diner, the door clicking softly behind her. The sunlight was sharp, almost unforgiving, as if the world itself was highlighting the sting of what had just happened. She paused on the sidewalk, the warm morning air brushing against her face, but it did little to soothe the tumult inside her. Her breakfast, pancakes she had been craving, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, was forgotten, replaced by a bitter taste that seemed to linger on her tongue. More than hunger, it was humiliation that weighed heavily on her chest. She felt it first as a physical sensation, a tightening in her ribs, as if the injustice had found a home there. Her mind replayed Todd Miller's words again and again. "Ma'am, we don't serve people like you here." Each repetition was sharper than the last, each one carving deeper into her awareness of how completely ordinary spaces could harbor extraordinary prejudice. It wasn't just a personal slight. It was the assumption, the sneering judgment, the casual cruelty that someone had the audacity to deliver in broad daylight. Samantha's pulse quickened, not in panic, but in the fiery recognition of what that moment represented. And then the wider implications hit. It wasn't just about her. Every person who had been turned away, stared down, or demeaned simply for existing in a space that should have welcomed them, every injustice, every slight, every quiet humiliation, they all came crashing together in an overwhelming wave. The anger from moments ago had shifted slightly, softened by a bitter, almost mournful pain. This was larger than a diner, larger than one man's ignorance. This was a reminder of a persistent truth, that the world, for all its progress, still carried the stains of prejudice. Samantha's hand brushed her forehead, her fingers trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the intensity of her emotions. She tried to focus, to steady herself. She was trained for situations far more dangerous than this one, for circumstances where life or death hung on split-second decisions, but the complexity of human cruelty, its subtlety, its audacity, was something no manual could fully prepare her for. She realized that this pain was not a sign of fragility. It was a signal, a call to awareness, demanding that she channel her feelings into action rather than allow them to fester. Her eyes wandered across the street, observing the morning life that seemed oblivious to her turmoil. Children laughed as they walked to a nearby school. A man walked his dog without noticing her, and cars honked in the distance. It was ordinary, mundane, the world moving forward as if nothing had happened. But Samantha felt the weight of contrast sharply. The ordinary moments, the normalcy of daily life, juxtaposed against the deep wound left by one person's cruelty. It was a jarring awareness that left her almost breathless, as though the injustice had carved a hollow inside her that could not simply be ignored. And then she drew a long, measured breath, feeling the air fill her lungs, centering herself. She thought of her training with the FBI, the discipline, the clarity of thought, the ability to assess and respond with precision. For years, she had been taught to control her reactions, to remain composed under pressure, and to recognize opportunities where others only saw obstacles. She considered the path ahead, to ignore Todd's actions and dismiss the incident as the ignorance of one man, or to confront it decisively, in a manner that he, and the diner, would never anticipate. The pain lingered, but it sharpened her resolve. The humiliation, the injustice, and the bitter awareness of systemic prejudice transformed from a passive wound into a driving force. Samantha's jaw tightened, a quiet fire kindling within her. She would not let this moment pass unchallenged. She would turn the sting of humiliation into a tool, a reminder of the power she held, not just as a citizen, but as someone trained to uphold justice. And in that moment, amid the ordinary sounds of the city, Samantha knew that she would return. Not in anger alone, but with the authority and clarity to turn a moment of personal pain into a statement that no act of prejudice could go unchecked. She straightened her shoulders, took another deep breath, and began planning the return, her mind already calculating the steps that would ensure justice was served. The bell above the Grand Oak Diner jingled softly, its familiar chime cutting through the murmur of conversation and the occasional clang of silverware. A hush rippled through the room, not because anyone realized something extraordinary was about to happen, but because the diner's rhythm was subtly interrupted. Most patrons barely registered the new customer entering. For them, it was just another face stepping into the morning crowd. But this face was different. Samantha Lewis walked in, moving with quiet confidence. She wore the crisp navy blue uniform of the FBI, the badge pinned neatly over her heart, catching the light as she entered. Her posture was impeccable, every step measured, controlled, radiating authority without a word being spoken. The casual observer might have simply seen a professional woman entering for a meal. Todd Miller, however, recognized immediately that this was no ordinary patron. His previous smugness faltered, his smirk wavered. The air seemed to shift as Samantha's eyes locked on the table she had been denied earlier. Todd's posture stiffened. The din of conversation faded from his awareness as a sharp realization struck him. The person he had dismissed, humiliated, and insulted minutes ago was not just any customer. She was a federal agent trained to observe, assess, and enforce the law. The authority she embodied was not symbolic. It was real, palpable, and inescapable. Samantha paused briefly, letting the moment stretch. She allowed Todd to fully comprehend the consequences of his actions, her calmness amplifying the weight of the situation. Then, in a voice that was both firm and measured, she spoke. "Is there a problem here, sir?" The words, simple as they were, carried the force of undeniable authority. Todd's eyes widened, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. He opened his mouth, searching for an excuse, but the words caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. The diner, sensing the sudden tension, fell into a quiet hush. Conversations died mid-sentence, forks paused over plates, and all eyes turned subtly toward the interaction unfolding near the front. Samantha didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone commanded respect. She slowly unbuckled her satchel, set it beside her, and allowed her gaze to sweep the room, not in menace, but in steady, assured observation. Todd shifted under her scrutiny, fidgeting with a napkin, his prior confidence evaporating. "I'm here to address a violation of federal law," Samantha continued, her tone unwavering. "Discrimination based on race is not only morally unacceptable, it is illegal. Everyone here has a right to equal service without judgment or bias. Your actions just moments ago constitute a serious offense under federal oversight." Her calm fury was deliberate. She spoke without anger, yet every word carried the weight of consequences. Todd tried to respond, to stammer an apology, but Samantha's presence and measured authority left no room for excuses. The words hung in the air, clear and precise, a reminder that injustice, even subtle, casual prejudice, would not be ignored. Patrons shifted uneasily in their seats. Some exchanged glances, realizing that what had seemed a simple diner interaction had escalated into a confrontation with real-world implications. Todd, meanwhile, was visibly shaken. He had underestimated the woman he had dismissed, never imagining that someone with integrity, courage, and authority could turn humiliation into accountability so quickly. Samantha's gaze softened slightly, not in forgiveness but in resolve. She wasn't here to humiliate Todd for the sake of satisfaction. She was here to restore order, to correct an injustice, and to remind everyone present that civility, respect, and the law were not optional. She had stepped back into the diner not in anger, but in control, transforming a moment of personal pain into a powerful assertion of principle. And in that silence, thick with tension and understanding, Samantha realized something profound. Hope was alive in this moment. Not the naive hope that prejudice could be erased instantly, but the powerful hope that action, authority, and unwavering dignity could create change, even in the smallest, most ordinary spaces. The stage was set. Justice, calm and deliberate, had arrived. By the time Samantha Lewis stepped back out into the morning light, the atmosphere inside the Grand Oak Diner had shifted entirely. Todd Miller, the waiter whose arrogance had sparked the morning's tension, now stood sheepish and subdued behind the counter. His arms, once crossed in defiance, hung loosely at his sides. The diner manager, a middle-aged man with a worried crease in his forehead, approached Todd quietly, delivering a stern reprimand that left no room for argument. Samantha could hear snippets of the conversation as she walked past, promises of mandatory sensitivity training, formal apologies, and a commitment to review the diner's policies to ensure that discrimination could not happen again. The transformation in the diner was almost palpable. Patrons who had previously been engrossed in their breakfast were now murmuring among themselves. Their voices carried a mix of amazement and admiration as they processed what had just happened. A few approached Samantha cautiously, their expressions a blend of gratitude and awe. One woman, her voice low but sincere, said, "Thank you for doing what so many of us wish we could." Another man, nodding slightly, whispered, "It takes real courage to stand up like that." Samantha acknowledged each word with a quiet smile, her demeanor calm and composed. She didn't need accolades or recognition. The satisfaction came from knowing that justice had been restored in a way that was measured and principled. The humiliation she had felt minutes earlier, the bitter sting of being judged unfairly, had been transformed into a quiet triumph. The pain and anger she had endured had fueled her actions, turning personal injustice into a larger lesson about integrity accountability, and resilience. As she adjusted the strap of her satchel and stepped onto the sidewalk, she allowed herself a moment to reflect. Justice, she realized, did not always arrive with loud proclamations or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it came quietly, carried on the firm, unwavering authority of someone who refused to accept wrongdoing as normal. Her presence, calm yet resolute, had been enough to redirect the course of events, ensuring that fairness prevailed without creating chaos or unnecessary conflict. The morning air felt lighter now, almost celebratory. Cars passed by, pedestrians strolled along the sidewalk, and children's laughter echoed faintly from the nearby park. Everything seemed ordinary, yet Samantha knew that the ripple of her actions would linger far longer than the day itself. The lesson she had silently imparted, to Todd, to the diners, to everyone who had witnessed the moment, was unmistakable. Injustice may occur, but it need not go unanswered. Courage, discipline, and a commitment to doing what is right could transform even the smallest space into a place of accountability. Samantha allowed herself a small, private smile. She felt the tension in her chest ease, replaced by a warm, steady sense of empowerment. What had begun as an ordinary Saturday morning, tainted by prejudice, had become a testament to the power of one individual's resolve. She understood now, more than ever, that standing up with integrity was not just about personal vindication. It was about inspiring others, showing them that action could create change, and that no act of injustice, however small, had to be tolerated silently. As she walked away from the diner, Samantha noticed the quiet expressions of reflection among the patrons. A few exchanged glances, nodding subtly, as if silently acknowledging the lesson they had witnessed. Some would carry that inspiration into their own lives, confronting bias, speaking up for fairness, and challenging the subtle forms of prejudice that often went unchecked. Samantha's steps were measured, calm, yet filled with an undeniable energy, the energy of someone who had reclaimed her dignity and transformed a moment of personal pain into a broader statement of justice. She didn't need to look back to know the effect she had made. In that moment, she understood the true weight of integrity, and how even one person's courage could ripple outward, creating change in ways both quiet and profound. By the time she reached the street corner, the city had returned to its ordinary rhythm. Yet Samantha knew that the impact of her actions would linger, quietly, in the awareness of those who had seen her act with unwavering principle. And as she walked on, a sense of purpose filled her chest, a reminder that one person, standing firm in the face of injustice, could inspire others to do the same.